The rope burned through Isaac Turner's calloused hands as the bucket plummeted back down the well, and for one desperate moment, he wanted to let himself tumble right after it into that dark, promising nothing. The September sun beat down mercilessly on Bismarck, Dakota Territory in 1881, turning the dry earth to dust and Isaac's grief into something hard and brittle that lived in his chest like a stone. He had been hauling water from this same well for 3 months now, ever since Martha and little Samuel had been taken by the fever, and each day felt more pointless than the last. You planning to stand there all day staring into that hole, or are you actually going to bring up some water? The voice was feminine, sharp with impatience but not unkind, and it startled Isaac so badly he nearly dropped the rope entirely. He turned to find a woman standing about 10 feet away, holding 2 empty pails and wearing a practical calico dress that had seen better days. She was tall for a woman, probably in her early 20s, with dark auburn hair pulled back in a sensible bun and eyes the color of creek water in summer. There was something direct about her gaze that made him uncomfortable, as if she could see straight through all his carefully constructed walls. "I'm working on it," he muttered, turning back to the well and beginning to haul the rope up hand over hand. The bucket was heavy, full of cool water that sloshed over the sides as he lifted it to the surface. He poured it into his own containers without looking at the woman again, hoping she would just go away. She did not go away. Instead, she moved closer, setting her pails down with a decisive thunk. "You are Isaac Turner, are you not? You have the homestead about 2 miles west of here, the one with the broken fence and the overgrown garden." It was not really a question, but Isaac nodded anyway, feeling heat creep up his neck that had nothing to do with the sun. He knew what his property looked like, had known for months that he was letting everything fall to pieces around him. He just could not seem to care enough to fix it. "I am Josephine Nash," the woman continued, as if he had asked. "I moved into the old Henderson place 3 weeks ago. I have been watching you come here every other day, and every time you look like you are about to throw yourself down that well instead of drawing water from it." The bluntness of her words hit Isaac like a physical blow. He stepped back, nearly knocking over one of his water containers. "That is none of your concern, Miss Nash. Mrs. Nash, actually. I am a widow." She said it matter-of-factly, without any of the trembling sadness that still overcame Isaac when he had to speak of Martha. "My husband died 2 years ago in a mining accident in Colorado. I came here to start fresh, and I have no patience for watching another person waste away from grief when there is still living to be done. You do not know anything about me or what I am going through," Isaac said, his voice coming out harder than he intended. He grabbed his water containers, ready to leave, but Josephine Nash stepped directly into his path. "I know you lost your wife and child to scarlet fever in June," she said, and this time her voice was gentler. "Everyone in town knows that. I also know that you have barely tended your land since then, that you come here to draw water, but I would wager you hardly eat or take care of yourself properly. I know because I did the same thing after William died. I stopped living because it seemed disrespectful to him to keep going when he could not." Isaac felt something crack inside his chest, a painful splitting sensation that made it hard to breathe. "I do not need your pity or your meddling," he managed to say. "Good, because I am not offering pity. I am offering help." Josephine bent down and lowered the bucket back into the well herself, pulling it up with surprising strength for someone of her build. She filled both her pails and then looked at him expectantly. "You are going to help me carry these back to my place, and then you are going to eat a proper meal because you look like you have not had one in weeks. After that, I am going to help you fix your fence and clear your garden. Not because I pity you, but because neighbors help each other out here, and I need someone to show me how to repair the leak in my roof before winter comes." "I should refuse," Isaac said, but the words came out weak and uncertain. The truth was that the thought of going back to his empty homestead, of sitting alone in the house where Martha used to sing while she cooked, and Samuel used to play with his wooden toys, felt unbearable. At least this strange, forthright woman was offering distraction. "But you will not refuse," Josephine said with certainty. She picked up both her pails and started walking down the dusty road that led toward the Henderson place, clearly expecting him to follow. After a moment of hesitation, Isaac grabbed his own containers and trailed after her. He told himself it was just for one afternoon, just to be neighborly, and then he would go back to his solitary existence. But something about the set of Josephine Nash's shoulders, the determined way she moved through the world, made him wonder if she was the type of woman who would allow him to retreat back into his grief so easily. The Henderson place had always been modest, just a small cabin with a lean-to barn and a chicken coop, but Josephine had clearly been working hard to make it livable. The yard was swept clean, and someone had planted a late-season vegetable garden that was already showing green shoots. Chickens clucked and scratched in their pen, and Isaac could see that the barn door had been recently repaired. "You have done a lot of work in 3 weeks," he observed as they set the water pails down on the porch. "I cannot afford to hire help, so I do what I can myself," Josephine replied, pushing open the cabin door. The interior was simple but clean, with whitewashed walls and cheerful yellow curtains that Martha would have liked. The thought sent a pang through Isaac's chest, but it was duller than usual, less sharp. Josephine moved efficiently around the small kitchen area, stoking the fire in the stove and pulling out ingredients for what looked like it would be stew. "Sit down before you fall down," she ordered, gesturing to one of the 2 chairs at the small table. "You are swaying on your feet." Isaac wanted to argue, but she was right. He had not realized how exhausted he was until he sat down, and suddenly it felt like all the strength drained out of his body. He watched as Josephine chopped vegetables and browned some meat, her movements economical and practiced. She hummed while she worked, a low, tuneless sound that somehow filled the space with something other than silence. "Tell me about your husband," Isaac found himself saying, surprising himself. He was not usually one for conversation, especially not since Martha's death. Josephine paused in her chopping, considering the question. "William was a good man," she said finally. "Gentle, patient, always seeing the best in people. He wanted to strike it rich in the Colorado mine so we could buy a proper house, maybe have children. But the mine collapsed one day while he was working, and that was that. 16 men died that day, and I became a widow at 21 years old." "I am sorry," Isaac said, and he meant it. "I was sorry too for a long time, angry mostly. Angry at God, at William for leaving me, at myself for not convincing him to give up on the mines and find different work." She resumed chopping, the knife making steady thunks against the cutting board. "But eventually I realized that William would not have wanted me to stop living. He was always so full of life himself, always laughing and making plans. The best way I could honor him was to keep going, to build something good with the time I have left." Isaac was quiet for a long moment, absorbing her words. "I do not know how to do that," he admitted finally, his voice rough. "Everything reminds me of them. The house, the land, even this town. Martha was only 23. Samuel was 4 years old. They should still be here. You are right, they should be." Josephine turned to face him, her eyes serious. "It is not fair and it is not right, and you have every reason to be angry and lost. But Isaac, you are still breathing, and that means you still have a purpose, even if you cannot see it right now." "What if I do not want a purpose? What if I just want to be left alone to grieve? The words burst out of him with more force than he intended. Then I would say you are a coward, Josephine replied calmly, stirring the pot on the stove. You are hiding from life because living hurts. I understand that. I did the same thing for 6 months after William died. But then my money ran out and I had to make a choice. I could give up entirely, or I could honor William's memory by being brave enough to keep going. I chose to keep going. Isaac felt anger flare in his chest, hot and bright. You have no right to call me a coward. You do not know what I have been through. You are right. I do not know exactly what you have been through. Everyone's pain is their own. Josephine ladled stew into 2 bowls and brought them to the table, sitting down across from him. But I know about loss, and I know about despair, and I know that the only way out is through. You can be angry at me if you want. Anger is better than the nothing I saw in your eyes at the well. They ate in tense silence for a few minutes. The stew was good, hearty, and rich, and Isaac realized he had not eaten a proper meal in days. He had been living on stale bread and whatever he could grab without having to actually cook. His body responded to the food with desperate hunger, and he finished the bowl quickly. Josephine refilled it without comment and pushed a chunk of bread toward him. Eat, she said simply. By the time Isaac had finished his second bowl, some of the anger had drained away, leaving him feeling tired and oddly empty. I should not have called you meddling, he said quietly. You are not wrong, Josephine replied with a small smile. I am meddling, but someone needs to because you are drowning and you do not even seem to notice. I notice, Isaac said. I just do not care. Well, that is the problem then, is it not? Josephine stood and began clearing the dishes. You have decided that because the people you loved are gone, nothing else matters. But that is not how life works, Isaac Turner. Other people still exist. Other things still need doing. And whether you like it or not, you are still here and you still have responsibilities. What responsibilities? My family is dead. My land is going to seed. What does any of it matter? Josephine turned to face him, her hands on her hips. It matters because you are not the only person in this world. You have neighbors who worry about you. You have land that could grow food for people who are hungry. You have skills and strength that could help others. Just because your heart is broken does not mean you get to stop being a human being. The words hit harder than Isaac wanted to admit. He had been so wrapped up in his own grief that he had not thought about anything beyond his own pain. The idea that he still had some obligation to the world felt overwhelming and exhausting. I am not ready, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. No one is ever ready, Josephine replied, but her voice was gentler now. But we do it anyway. Now come on, you promised to help me with my roof. Isaac had not actually promised any such thing, but he found himself following her outside anyway. The afternoon sun was still bright and hot as Josephine dragged a ladder out of the barn and propped it against the side of the cabin. She climbed up with surprising agility and pointed to a spot where the wooden shingles were clearly damaged. Water has been leaking in right above my bed, she explained. I patched it from the inside, but it needs proper repair before the rain comes. Isaac climbed up after her, grateful for something concrete to focus on. Working with his hands had always helped him think, and there was something soothing about the simple task of replacing damaged shingles. They worked together in companionable silence, and Isaac found himself noticing little things about Josephine Nash. The way she bit her lower lip when she was concentrating, the efficiency of her movements, the fact that she did not seem to expect him to make conversation or explain himself. When they finished the roof repair, the sun was starting to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that Martha would have called beautiful. Isaac felt the familiar pang of loss, but it was accompanied by something else now, something that might have been the tiniest spark of interest in the world around him. "Thank you," Josephine said as they put the ladder away. "That would have taken me twice as long to do alone if I could have managed it at all." "You seem pretty capable," Isaac observed. "I have learned to be. When you are a woman alone, you either learn to do things yourself or you go without." She looked at him appraisingly. "Your turn now. Let us go see about that fence of yours." Isaac wanted to protest that it was getting late, that he was tired, that he just wanted to be alone. But something about Josephine's expectant expression made him nod instead. They walked the 2 miles to his property in the cooling evening air, and with each step, Isaac felt his stomach tighten with dread. He hated going home now, hated walking into the house that felt like a tomb. When they arrived, Isaac saw his homestead through Josephine's eyes and felt shame wash over him. The fence was indeed broken in several places, the garden was overgrown with weeds, and the whole place had an air of neglect and abandonment. This had been a thriving farm just a few months ago, when Martha was alive to tend the garden, and he had the energy to maintain everything properly. Josephine surveyed the property with a critical eye, but did not offer any criticism. Instead, she rolled up her sleeves and headed straight for the garden. "We will start here," she announced. "Gardens are like people. They need tending or they die, but they can come back if you give them attention." They worked until it was too dark to see, pulling weeds and clearing the beds. Isaac found himself telling Josephine about the different vegetables Martha had planted, how she had always been so proud of her tomatoes, how Samuel had loved to help her water everything even though he usually made more of a mess than he helped. The words came easier than he expected, and Josephine listened without interrupting, her hands never stopping their work. When they finally quit for the night, Isaac felt physically exhausted in a way he had not felt in months. It was a clean tiredness, the kind that came from honest work instead of the heavy fatigue of depression. "I will come back tomorrow," Josephine said as she prepared to walk back to her own place. "We will work on the fence." "You do not have to do that," Isaac protested weakly. "I know I do not have to. I want to. Besides, you still need to help me figure out why my chickens are not laying properly, and I have a loose board on my porch that needs fixing." She looked at him seriously. "I am not trying to fix you, Isaac. I am just trying to be your friend." Everyone needs friends. After she left, Isaac went into his house for the first time in days. Usually he slept in the barn because he could not stand to be inside where everything reminded him of his lost family. But tonight he forced himself to go in to light a lamp, to look at the rooms that had once been filled with love and laughter. It hurt. God, it hurt so much. But Josephine's words echoed in his mind. "You are still breathing, and that means you still have a purpose." He did not know what that purpose was yet, but for the first time since Martha and Samuel had died, he felt the faintest glimmer of something that was not despair. Josephine Nash came back the next day, just as she had promised, and the day after that, and the day after that. She brought food and insisted he eat properly. She worked alongside him to repair the fence and clear the rest of the garden. She told him stories about her life with William, about growing up in Missouri, about her dreams of making her homestead successful. And gradually, Isaac found himself talking too, telling her about his childhood in Ohio, about how he and Martha had met at a church social, about Samuel's bright laugh and curious questions. The pain of talking about them was still immense, but Josephine never shied away from it. She did not tell him that time would heal all wounds or that he would feel better eventually. She just listened and kept showing up, day after day, her presence steady and undemanding. One evening about 2 weeks after they had first met, they were sitting on Isaac's porch watching the sun set. The property was starting to look cared for again, and Isaac had even started cooking proper meals and sleeping in his own bed. The pit of despair he had been living in was not gone, but its walls were not quite as steep anymore. "Why are you doing this?" Isaac asked suddenly. "Why do you keep coming here, keep helping me?" Josephine was quiet for a moment, her eyes on the darkening sky. "Because no one did it for me," she said finally. "When William died, I was alone in Colorado with no family, no real friends. I sank into darkness and no one pulled me out. I had to claw my way back to the surface by myself, and it was the hardest thing I have ever done. When I saw you at that well, I saw myself 2 years ago, and I thought, maybe I could be for you what I wished someone had been for me." Isaac felt something shift in his chest, something warming and unfamiliar after months of cold numbness. "You are a remarkable woman, Josephine Nash." She turned to look at him, and in the fading light her eyes were soft. "I am just a woman who knows what it is like to hurt, and who believes that we are all supposed to help each other through the hard times." "I am glad you moved to the Henderson place," Isaac said, and he meant it. "I am glad you were at the well that day." "So am I," Josephine replied softly. As autumn deepened into October and the nights grew colder, Isaac and Josephine fell into an easy rhythm. They would work their separate homesteads during the morning, then spend the afternoons helping each other with various tasks. Isaac repaired Josephine's porch and fixed a broken wheel on her wagon. Josephine taught him how to make proper meals and helped him preserve what was left of his garden vegetables for winter. But more than the practical help, they gave each other something to look forward to. Isaac found himself thinking about what he would tell Josephine later as he went about his chores. He noticed things he wanted to share with her, funny observations or interesting thoughts. And when he saw her walking up his path each afternoon, he felt something that might have been happiness, or at least the beginning of it. One day in late October, Josephine arrived with her hair loose around her shoulders instead of pulled back in its usual practical bun. Isaac found himself staring, noticing for the first time how beautiful she was, how the auburn caught the light and gleamed like copper. "You are looking at me strangely," Josephine observed, tilting her head. "Do I have dirt on my face?" "No, I just noticed that your hair is down," Isaac said, feeling foolish. "It is pretty." Josephine's cheeks colored slightly. "It was annoying me pinned up today, but if it bothers you, I can put it back." "It does not bother me." The words came out more intense than Isaac intended, and suddenly the air between them felt charged with something new and uncertain. They had been growing closer for weeks now, but both of them had been carefully maintaining a certain distance, keeping things friendly but not intimate. Isaac because he felt guilty for having feelings for anyone other than Martha. Josephine because she did not want to push him into anything he was not ready for. But now, standing in Isaac's kitchen with the afternoon light streaming through the windows, something had shifted. "Isaac," Josephine said softly, "I need to tell you something." He waited, his heart beating harder than it should. "I have come to care for you," she continued, her voice steady but her eyes uncertain. "More than just as a friend or neighbor. And I know it is too soon. I know you are still grieving Martha and probably always will be. But I needed you to know that my feelings have changed, and if that makes you uncomfortable, I can stop coming around as much." Isaac felt like the ground had tilted beneath his feet. He had been so focused on his own confusing emotions that he had not considered that Josephine might be dealing with similar feelings. "You should not care for me," he said, the words coming out harsher than he meant. "I am broken, Josephine. I do not know if I will ever be whole again." "I am not asking you to be whole," Josephine replied. "I am broken too. We are both broken people trying to figure out how to keep living. But Isaac, you have to know that you have brought light back into my life too. These past weeks, helping you, spending time with you, It has made me feel alive again in a way I have not since William died." "I feel guilty," Isaac admitted, the words bursting out of him. "I feel guilty for caring about you, for thinking about you, for wanting to see you every day." "Martha has only been gone for months. What kind of man moves on that quickly?" "A man who is still alive," Josephine said gently. She moved closer, and Isaac could smell the lavender soap she used. "Martha would not want you to suffer forever. From everything you have told me about her, she loved you too much to want you to be miserable for the rest of your life. You did not know her. You cannot say what she would want. You are right. I did not know her, but I know love, and real love is not selfish. Real love wants the beloved to be happy, even when we are not there to share it." Josephine reached out and took his hand, her fingers warm against his. "I am not trying to replace Martha, Isaac. No one could. But I am here now, and I care about you, and I think maybe you care about me too." Isaac looked down at their joined hands, and something inside him crumbled. "I do care about you," he whispered. "God help me, I do. You pulled me out of that pit when I did not even want to be saved. You made me want to live again. But I am terrified, Josephine. I am terrified of caring about someone again because I know how much it hurts to lose them." "I am terrified too," Josephine admitted. "Every time I start to care about you more, I remember William and how much it hurt when he died." "But Isaac, the alternative is to live our whole lives afraid, never letting anyone in, never taking the risk. And that is not really living at all." They stood there in the quiet kitchen, hands clasped, both of them trembling slightly with the weight of what they were acknowledging. Finally, Isaac raised his other hand and gently touched Josephine's cheek. She leaned into the touch, her eyes closing briefly. "I am not ready for anything serious," Isaac said quietly. "I need time. I know. I am not asking for anything you cannot give." Josephine opened her eyes and looked at him. "I just needed you to know the truth. We can take as much time as you need." Isaac pulled her into an embrace, and she came willingly, wrapping her arms around him. They held each other for a long moment, two broken people finding comfort in shared warmth. It was not romantic exactly, not yet, but it was intimate in a way that mattered. Over the following weeks, things between them shifted again. They were more careful with each other, more aware of the feelings that were growing between them. Isaac found himself noticing everything about Josephine, the way she laughed, the determined set of her jaw when she was working on something difficult, the kindness in her eyes when she looked at him. And he caught her watching him sometimes with an expression that made his heart race. November brought the first real snow, and with it came new challenges. Isaac helped Josephine winterize her cabin and make sure she had enough firewood stacked. They worked together to slaughter and preserve meat for the winter. And as the days grew shorter and colder, they spent more time inside, talking by the fire, sharing meals, slowly learning everything about each other. One evening in mid-November, as they sat by Isaac's fireplace drinking coffee, Josephine asked him to tell her more about Martha. Isaac stiffened instinctively, but then he saw the genuine interest in Josephine's eyes and realized she was not threatened by his past. She wanted to know about the woman he had loved because it would help her understand him better, so he told her. He told her about Martha's love of singing, about how she had always seen the best in everyone, about her dreams of having a big family and filling their house with children. He told her about Samuel's curiosity, his endless questions, the way he had followed Isaac around wanting to help with everything. And for the first time, talking about them did not feel like tearing open a wound. It felt like honoring their memory. "They sound wonderful," Josephine said softly when he finished. "I wish I could have known them." "They would have liked you," Isaac replied, surprised to realize it was true. Martha had always appreciated strong, capable women, and she would have respected Josephine's independence and kindness. "Tell me something," Josephine said, setting down her coffee cup. "If Martha were here right now, what do you think she would say about us? About you and me?" Isaac considered the question seriously. "I think she would want me to be happy. She always said life was too short to waste time being miserable. And I think she would like you, Josephine. She would appreciate how you helped me when I needed it most." "I hope so," Josephine said. "Because I am in love with you, Isaac Turner, and I do not want to feel guilty about it anymore." The declaration hung in the air between them, bold and unmistakable. Isaac's heart hammered in his chest as he looked at Josephine's face, seeing the vulnerability and courage it took for her to say those words. "I am falling in love with you too," he said finally, the words feeling both terrifying and liberating. "I have been fighting it because it feels too soon, but I cannot fight it anymore. When I wake up in the morning, you are the first thing I think about. When something happens during the day, I want to tell you about it. You have become essential to me, Josephine, and that scares me to death." Josephine moved from her chair to sit beside him on the small sofa. "We can be scared together," she said softly. "But let us not waste what we have because of fear." Isaac reached for her, pulling her close, and this time when he kissed her it was not tentative or uncertain. It was a kiss full of longing and need, of two people who had been alone for too long finally finding their way to each other. Josephine kissed him back with equal intensity, her hands tangling in his hair, and for the first time in months, Isaac felt truly alive. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Josephine rested her forehead against his. "I have wanted to do that for weeks," she admitted. "I wish I had done it sooner," Isaac replied, running his thumb along her jaw. "I have wasted too much time being afraid. You needed that time to heal. We both did." Josephine kissed him again, softer this time. "But I think we are ready now, ready to try again, to build something new." They talked late into the night about what this meant, about their hopes and fears, about the practical realities of combining their lives. It was decided that Josephine would keep living at her place for now, to maintain propriety, but they would start planning a future together. Isaac wanted to do things properly, to court her the right way, even though they had already gone about things somewhat backwards. Over the following weeks, Isaac courted Josephine with a determination that surprised them both. He brought her flowers that he had dried and preserved. He took her on walks even in the cold weather, showing her the places on his land that were special to him. He wrote her letters even though they saw each other nearly every day, trying to find words for the feelings that overwhelmed him. Josephine bloomed under the attention. She had never expected to fall in love again, had resigned herself to a life alone. But Isaac's devotion was healing something in her too, reminding her that she was worthy of love, that her life still had joy and purpose ahead of it. In early December, Isaac went into Bismarck and bought a ring. It was simple, just a gold band with a small stone, but it was what he could afford, and he thought Josephine would appreciate the practicality. He planned to propose on Christmas, wanting to give them both something to celebrate during what would otherwise be a difficult holiday season. Christmas Eve arrived cold and clear, with snow blanketing everything in white. Isaac invited Josephine to his house for dinner, promising her something special. She arrived wearing her best dress, a deep blue wool that brought out her eyes, and Isaac felt his breath catch at the sight of her. They ate the meal he had prepared, both of them nervous for different reasons. Finally, as they sat by the fire afterward, Isaac got down on one knee and pulled out the ring. "Josephine Nash, you came into my life when I was drowning in despair," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "You hauled me out of that pit, gave me a reason to keep living, showed me that it is possible to love again after loss. I know I am not perfect, and I know I will always carry some grief for the family I lost. But I love you with everything I have, and I want to build a new life with you. Will you marry me?" Josephine's eyes filled with tears as she nodded. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, Isaac, I will marry you. I love you so much." He slid the ring onto her finger and pulled her into his arms, both of them laughing and crying at the same time. It felt right in a way that Isaac had not been sure he would ever feel again. Not the same as what he had with Martha, but equally real, equally precious. They were married in early January of 1882, in a simple ceremony at the small church in Bismarck. Neither of them had much family, but the neighbors they had made friends with attended, and the preacher spoke about second chances and the resilience of the human spirit. When Isaac kissed his new wife, he felt Martha's blessing on them, a sense that she would be happy he had found love again. Josephine moved into Isaac's homestead, and they combined their resources and efforts. The land that Isaac had let go fallow began producing again. Josephine's chickens thrived in the larger coop Isaac built. Together they were stronger than they had been apart, two broken pieces that somehow fit together into something whole. The first year of their marriage was not without challenges. They both still had moments of grief, times when the past threatened to overwhelm the present. Isaac sometimes woke from dreams of Martha and Samuel with tears on his face, and Josephine occasionally grew quiet and withdrawn thinking about William. But they learned to give each other grace for those moments, to hold space for the grief while still building their future together. In the fall of 1882, Josephine discovered she was pregnant. The news brought both joy and terror. Isaac was afraid of losing another child, afraid his heart could not survive that kind of pain again. Josephine was worried about childbirth, about whether she could be a good mother, about whether it was fair to bring a child into a world that had already taken so much from both of them. But as winter turned to spring and Josephine's belly grew round with new life, hope began to outweigh fear. They prepared a nursery in what had been Samuel's room, and though it hurt to clear out his things, it also felt like a form of healing. They were not replacing Samuel, but they were making room for new life, new possibilities. Josephine went into labor on a warm day in May of 1883. The midwife from town came to help, and Isaac paced outside the bedroom, remembering too vividly the fever that had taken Martha and Samuel, terrified that history was about to repeat itself. But when he heard the strong, healthy cry of his newborn son, followed shortly by Josephine calling his name, relief washed over him so powerfully he nearly collapsed. He entered the bedroom to find Josephine exhausted but glowing, holding a red-faced baby boy who was screaming his displeasure at being born. "He has your stubbornness," Josephine said with a tired smile. "He did not want to come out." Isaac sat on the bed beside them, looking down at his son with wonder. The baby had a shock of dark hair and tiny, perfect fingers that wrapped around Isaac's thumb when he offered it. "He is beautiful," Isaac whispered. "You are beautiful. I cannot believe we did this." "We did," Josephine agreed. "We made something good together, Isaac." They named him James after Isaac's father, and he was a healthy, vigorous baby who quickly became the center of their world. Isaac had worried that having another child would feel like a betrayal of Samuel's memory, but instead he found that his heart simply expanded to hold more love. Samuel would always be his firstborn, always be remembered, but James was his son too, precious in his own right. Life settled into a new rhythm. Isaac and Josephine worked their land, raised their son, and slowly built the life they had both thought was lost to them forever. They had 2 more children over the next 4 years, a daughter they named Julia and another son they called Matthew. Their homestead prospered, becoming one of the more successful farms in the area. But more than the material success, they had built something deeper together. They had learned how to honor their pasts while still living fully in their present. They had learned that love does not run out, that it is possible to lose everything and still find reasons to keep going. And they had learned that sometimes the people who save us are the ones we least expect. On their 10th wedding anniversary in January of 1892, Isaac and Josephine sat on their porch watching their children play in the snow. James was 8 now, a serious boy with Isaac's quiet nature. Julia was 6, bright and curious like her mother. Matthew was 4, still a baby in many ways, with a laugh that filled the house with joy. "You ever think about that day at the well?" Josephine asked, her hand warm in Isaac's despite the cold. "When I saw you staring down into it like you wanted to jump in." "I think about it often," Isaac admitted. "I think about what would have happened if you had not been there that day, if you had not decided to meddle in the life of a broken stranger. I would not have all this. I would not have you or our children or this life we have built." "I think about it too," Josephine said softly. "And I realize that in saving you, I saved myself too. I was so lonely, Isaac, so tired of being alone with my grief. Helping you gave me purpose again. It reminded me that I still had something to offer the world." Isaac pulled her closer, kissing the top of her head. "You offered everything. You gave me back my life. You hauled me out of that pit of despair when I did not even want to be saved." "And you were hauling water from the well," Josephine added with a small smile. "Both of us were drawing up what we needed to survive, even if we did not realize it at the time." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching their children build a snowman, listening to their laughter carry on the cold air. The past would always be part of them. Isaac still thought about Martha and Samuel, especially on their birthdays and anniversaries. Josephine still missed William and the life they had started to build together. But grief no longer defined them. They had learned to carry it alongside their joy, to make room for both sorrow and happiness in their hearts. "I am grateful," Isaac said finally, "for all of it, even the pain, because it led me to you." "Is that wrong?" "No," Josephine replied. "I think it is human. We are shaped by everything that happens to us, good and bad. The pain we went through made us who we are. It taught us how to appreciate what we have now." As the sun began to set, painting the snow in shades of pink and gold, they called their children inside for dinner. The house that had once felt like a tomb now rang with the sounds of family, with laughter and chatter, and the comfortable chaos of children. Isaac cooked while Josephine helped the kids wash up, and as he stirred the pot, he thought about that day at the well, about how close he had come to giving up entirely. He was grateful every single day that Josephine Nash had been there. Grateful that she had seen him drowning and refused to look away. Grateful that she had been brave enough to reach out, even when he tried to push her away. She had saved his life, but more than that, she had taught him how to live again. That night, after the children were asleep and they lay in bed together, Isaac held Josephine close and whispered, "I love you more than I thought it was possible to love anyone." "Even more than Martha?" Josephine asked, not jealously but with genuine curiosity. Isaac considered the question carefully. "Differently than Martha. What we have is built on different things. We both came to this knowing about loss, knowing how precious and fragile life is. We do not take each other for granted because we know how quickly everything can change. I will always love Martha for who she was and what we had, but I love you for who you are now, for what you have given me, for the life we are building together." Josephine kissed him softly. "That is all I need to hear. I do not need to be the only person you have ever loved. I just need to be the person you choose now." "I choose you," Isaac said firmly. "Every day I choose you." The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. They weathered droughts and hard winters, celebrated good harvests and the milestones of their growing children. James grew into a responsible young man who loved working the land as much as his father did. Julia developed a passion for teaching and spent hours reading to her younger brother. Matthew was the wild one, always getting into mischief, keeping his parents on their toes. In 1895, when James was 13, he asked his father about the stone markers in the small cemetery plot at the edge of their property. Isaac had maintained the graves of Martha and Samuel all these years, keeping the area neat and planting flowers every spring. He had never hidden his past from his children, but he had not talked about it in detail either. "Those are my first wife and my first son," Isaac explained, kneeling beside the graves with James. "They died from scarlet fever a long time ago before I met your mother. Were you sad?" James asked with the straightforward curiosity of a child. "I was devastated," Isaac replied honestly. "So sad that I did not want to live anymore. But then I met your mother, and she helped me find my way back. She taught me that even after terrible loss, there can still be joy and love and a good life." James was quiet for a moment, studying the stones. "Do you still miss them?" "Every day," Isaac admitted, "but it does not hurt the way it used to. Now, when I think about them, I am grateful for the time we had together instead of just sad about losing them. And I am grateful that their loss eventually led me to your mother, even though I would never have chosen to lose them if I had any other option." "I am glad you met Mama," James said simply. "Otherwise I would not be here." Isaac pulled his son into a hug, feeling the truth of those words. So much good had come from so much pain. His 3 children, his happy marriage, the life he and Josephine had built. None of it would exist if things had happened differently. It was a complicated thing to be grateful for, but it was true nonetheless. By 1900, Isaac and Josephine had been married for 18 years. Their homestead had grown into one of the most prosperous in the area. James, now 18 himself, was preparing to claim his own land nearby and start his own farm. Julia, at 16, was teaching at the local school and courting a nice young man from town. Matthew, at 12, was still deciding what he wanted to do with his life, but showed promise at everything he tried. Isaac was 42 now, his hair starting to gray at the temples. Josephine was 41, laugh lines around her eyes and a few more curves than when they had first met. But to Isaac, she had never been more beautiful. She was his partner in every sense, working alongside him, raising their children together, sharing the burdens and joys of life. One evening in late summer, they took a walk to the well where they had first met. It was still used by people in the area, though Isaac had built his own well on his property years ago. They stood beside it in the fading light, remembering. "I was so arrogant that day," Josephine said with a laugh. "Just marching up to a complete stranger and telling him he looked like he wanted to jump into a well. What was I thinking?" "You were thinking that someone needed help and you were brave enough to offer it," Isaac replied, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "You saw someone drowning and you threw them a rope. That is not arrogance. That is courage." "I almost did not say anything," Josephine admitted. "I stood there for probably 5 minutes trying to talk myself out of it. I kept thinking it was not my business, that you would probably tell me to go away. But I remembered how alone I felt after William died, and I thought maybe I could spare you some of that loneliness." "You spared me everything," Isaac said, turning her to face him. "You gave me a reason to live when I thought I had none left. You showed me that it was possible to build a new life after losing everything. You hauled me out of my pit of despair, Josephine, and I have been grateful every single day since." "And you hauled water from this well," Josephine added, looking down into its depths. You were still doing the work of living even when you did not want to. That takes strength, Isaac. You were not as lost as you thought you were." "I was lost enough," Isaac said quietly, "but you found me anyway." They walked back home hand in hand as the stars began to appear overhead. The Dakota Territory had become a state in 1889, and Bismarck was growing into a real city. The Wild West was changing, becoming more civilized, more settled. But some things remained constant: the land, the sky, the need for human connection. When they reached their homestead, their children were waiting on the porch. James had brought his new fiancée to dinner, a sweet girl named Emma who reminded Isaac a bit of Martha with her gentle nature. Julia and her beau were there too. Everyone gathered for a family meal. Matthew was chasing the dog around the yard, his laughter ringing out. Isaac stood for a moment taking it all in. The house that was no longer empty, the family that filled it with life, the woman beside him who had made it all possible. This was what healing looked like. Not forgetting the past, but building a future that honored both the pain and the joy that came before. "What are you thinking?" Josephine asked, noticing his thoughtful expression. "I am thinking that I am the luckiest man alive," Isaac replied. "I have lost everything and found it again, different but just as precious. I have you, our children, this life we have built together. And I am thinking that if I could go back to that day at the well and tell that broken, despairing man what his future held, he would not believe me." "Would you tell him?" Josephine asked curiously. "If you could." Isaac considered the question. "No," he said finally, "because he needed to go through the darkness to appreciate the light. He needed to be broken so he could be put back together stronger, and he needed you to show him the way." "I would not change any of it, even the painful parts, because it all led here." They joined their family on the porch, and as they sat down to dinner, Isaac caught Josephine's eye across the table. She smiled at him, that same direct, fearless smile she had given him at the well all those years ago. And he smiled back, grateful beyond words for the day she had decided to meddle, to reach out, to save a stranger who turned out to be the other half of her heart. The Wild West was fading into history, but their love story would endure. They would tell it to their grandchildren someday, about how they had both been drowning in different ways and had saved each other. About how she had hauled him from his pit of despair, while he was hauling water from a well, two broken people doing the work of survival until they realized they could do more than just survive. They could live. They could love. They could build something beautiful from the ashes of their grief. And they did, every single day for the rest of their long and happy lives together. Because sometimes the deepest love grows not in spite of pain, but because of it. Sometimes the strongest bonds are forged between people who understand loss and choose connection anyway. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is reach out to a stranger and offer them hope when they have none left of their own. Isaac Turner had been hauling water from the well, going through the motions of living without really living at all. Josephine Nash had hauled him from his pit of despair, showing him that life still had beauty and purpose and love to offer. Together, they had built something neither of them thought possible again: a family, a home, a future full of joy. And that was the greatest gift of all.